47% of Jewish Israelis answered that Israel does not need to abide by international law and maintain moral values in the war. Simply put, it's a genocidal society, top to bottom. Perhaps the most complicit party to enabling this genocide, aside from the material support of Western governments, is the Western media. As previously mentioned, this support largely takes two forms: the more overt kinds, like spreading misinformation and explicit Israeli state and IDF propaganda, and the other more subtle, yet significantly more frequent and effective, is that of manufacturing consent. Reporting on Palestinians has some clear differences in coverage, language, and framing when compared with other groups. In the first 100 days after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, 262 children were killed. In the first 100 days of Israel's assault on Gaza, more than 10,000 children were killed. The true number is likely much higher, but mentions of child deaths and related terms were 33.4% higher for Ukraine than for Gaza.
I'm so curious how this is even broken down, because the only thing I've ever read when it comes to stories about the current war is how many children are being killed. Like every single fucking story.
Related terms were 33.4% higher for Ukraine than for Gaza. During this time frame, CNN mentioned child victims of the war 2,446 times for Ukraine versus 2,110 times for Gaza, and MSNBC mentioned child victims of the Ukraine war 1,775 times versus 1,522 times for Gaza. This means that for each child death from Ukraine, children received the equivalent of 16.1 mentions on.
Oh, he's doing it by calculating the per number of child deaths and creating a ratio of the number of child deaths to the mentions in the media. Bro, what is this? Holy shit. Talk about tortured stats. What the fuck? What is this calculation? What? Also, by the way, one of the reasons probably... Well, there's two. I'm going to go with the one big reasons why the children in Ukraine is probably mentioned so much is because that's also the basis by which Ukraine has taken the ICJ or has taken Russia to the International Court of Justice over claims of genocide. It has to do with the abduction and the deportation of children from Ukraine. It was on this basis that that their genocide claims were filed. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was mentioned more as a result of that too. But he's not going to mention that, though. But we'll see. He won't. I don't know why I just said we'll see. He won't.
On air, whereas children in Gaza received the equivalent of 0.36 mentions. MSNBC did not run a single segment in the first 100 days that focused specifically and exclusively on the plight of children in Gaza.
In the first 100 days, they didn't... What is the qualification of that exclusively focused on... children? What does that mean? Or I don't even know what that would mean.
NBC ran over a dozen segments focusing specifically on the plight of Ukrainian children.
Because they filed an actual court case in the International Court of Justice specifically and explicitly about child abduction. Of course, it's a totally different thing.
During the first 100 days of that conflict. Emotive language was barely ever used to describe the killing of Palestinians. This comes despite the vastly higher death toll over the same period. On CNN and MSNBC, the words war crime and genocide were mentioned 17 times more in the context of Ukraine.
Because they actually filed like an explicit genocide claim in the International Court of Justice. Although there is one as well for... There's one as well for, obviously, for Gaza as well. On CNN and MSNBC, the words war crime or genocide, on CNN and MSNBC, genocide were mentioned more than 17 times more in the context of Ukraine than they were in the context of Gaza. First 30 days. The disparity is likely much greater because our count in the context of Gaza includes many instances of Hamas. Wait, does he not... Hello? The disparity is likely much greater because our count in the context of Gaza includes... many instances of Hamas being accused of war crimes and genocide. Oh, so they're saying that it should even be further apart. I wonder what source is he pulling from here? Is this www.fuckisrael.com? I'm curious where these graphs and numbers and everything are coming from. But
then in the context of Gaza, Ukrainian victims were labeled as subject to war crimes or genocide 1,790 times compared to just 104 mentions for Palestinians. And we still see this now, obviously. During the hostage exchange...
Would you agree that Gaza is closer to a genocide than Ukraine? Not at all. I think you can argue the Ukrainian genocide thing on two fronts more convincingly than you can argue Gazan genocide. You can maybe argue a Gazan ethnic cleansing more, but the two fronts that you would argue the Ukrainian genocide on are, one is the mass abduction of children, which fits the mens rea, the special mens rea for genocide, and the action of abducting children to retrain them culturally and to re-raise them as a different type of citizen, right? Which is something that Russia's been accused of doing. I don't remember if it was from Mariupol or something else where they supposedly abducted all these children from. And two is Putin's statements about Ukrainians and Russians being like one type of people, and that Ukraine belongs to Russia because they have a rich history together and they're one people, right? This deletion or erasure of the Ukrainian identity and people would also count as a special qualification for the crime of genocide, because you're trying to eliminate a group of people with the intent of doing so. Israel has not expressed either of those intents, to eliminate a group of people like the Palestinians, or to abduct and retrain children, I guess.
Exchanges as a result of the latest so-called ceasefire, for example. You may notice that Palestinians detained without charges in Israeli jails, of which there are thousands, they are referred to as prisoners, whereas the IDF soldiers...
This is such... Bro, how much of this is just like rehashed bullshit talking points? Yeah, people that live in the West Bank, or people that live in Israel proper, or I guess people that get arrested in the Gaza Strip, that are arrested and they're put into a prison or whatever, and we can argue over, because that whole process also, by the way, is a little bit fucky, right? Because the West Bank, for instance, is a military occupation at times, depending on what Israel wants it to be, depending on what argument they're making, right? And the people that are arrested go through like a military tribunal process, which is strange. It's not good. It's not right for people being occupied, especially for 70 plus fucking years or whatever, right? But to compare that process, which I think is rightfully criticizable. I don't think that's a word. You can be a critic of that policy for sure, and you have very strong and solid ground to stand on there while criticizing that. To say that, well, those people are just the same as the hostages that were captured on October 7th is what?
17 times more in the context of Ukraine than in the context of Gaza. Ukrainian victims were labeled as subject to war crimes or genocide 1,790 times compared to just 104 mentions for Palestinians. And we still see this now, obviously. During the hostage exchanges as a result of the latest so-called ceasefire, for example, you may notice that Palestinians detained without charges in Israeli jails, of which there are thousands, they are referred to as prisoners, whereas the IDF soldiers, that is, actual militants that were captured by Hamas on a...
Wrong! That is a wrong reading of international law. Even if it's a soldier, if you capture somebody outside of combat, like it's not like a combat operation, they weren't at war. If you capture somebody like that, it doesn't matter if they're a soldier or not. That's still taking of a hostage. And when you do it with the explicit goal, and this is even if you do this during an active war, if you capture soldiers and you try to use them as pawns for some type of negotiation, that's also considered hostage taking. It doesn't matter if they're militants or not. That's hostage taking.
October 7th are referred to as hostages. One of the greatest tweets of all time that I've ever seen described the capture of an IDF terrorist during October 7th as him being kidnapped from a tank. Kidnapped from a tank. Kidnapped from a tank.
Do you think this is a tank that he was like fighting in, or do you think this is something that he fucking ran and fucking hid in? Because by the time the IDF had been responding in force, I don't think that anybody was being captured at that point. I want to see the origination of the story. But also, again, this is still, even if it was a full military, when can you take hostages? Never! Hostage taking is it's a war crime. You're not allowed to take hostages. You're never allowed to take hostages. If you take POWs, you capture POWs, you house them, you feed them, you whatever, and then you just keep them as prisoners of war. I don't remember exactly what the deals are for like POW exchanges or whatever, but you're not allowed to capture. We can look at this. IHL, hostage taking. Rule 96. State practice establishes this rule as a norm of customary international law. Prohibits the taking of hostages. It is also prohibited by the 14th Geneva Convention. It's considered a great breach thereof. Try to some extent to depart from recognizes a fundamental guarantee for civilians and persons ordered to combat. These mean non-combatants, or people that aren't able to fight, I think, for civilians and people unable to fight. Hostage is also listed a war crime in the ICC, blah, blah, blah. You're taking UN peacekeepers as hostage. International human rights does not... the practice is prohibited by virtue of non-derogable human rights law because it amounts to arbitrary deprivation of liberty, blah, 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 blah. defines the offense to your attention of a person, hostage combining with threat to kill, to injure, or to continue to detain the hostage in order to compel a third party. Okay, so defines the offense as the seizure or detention of a person, the hostage, combined with threatening to kill, to injure, or to continue to detain the hostage in order to compel a third party to do or to abstain from doing any act as an explicit or implicit condition for the release of the hostage. This is hostage taking. Although the prohibition of hostage-taking is specified in the Fourth Geneva Convention and is typically associated with the holdings of civilians as hostages, there's no indication that the offense is limited to taking civilians hostage. Common Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions, the statute of the International Criminal Court, and the International Convention against the taking of hostages do not limit the offense to the taking of civilians, but apply it to the taking of any person. Indeed, in the elements of crimes for the International Criminal Court, the definition applies to the taking of any person protected by the Geneva Conventions, which is most, basically, people. But, for prisoners of war, you can just, you capture them, you feed them. I think you're allowed to do POW exchanges or something, but you can't like compel an enemy side of, you can't compel an enemy side to be like, hey, we've got a bunch of prisoners of war. If you don't stop attacking us, we're gonna start killing them, or we're gonna start torturing. Like, you're not allowed to do that. When you have a prisoner of war, all you can do is feed them and house them, and that's it. You can't threaten them or compel the other side, like, let's stop this war and I'll give you the hostages back. You're not allowed, that's a war crime. But hold on, I'm just curious what this guy's story is. Ton and Grest. Is there a story detailing his... Monster uses propaganda video, giving sign of life to Matan Angrest. Beyond the serious mental state observed in the footage, his right arm no longer functions, his eyes mouth are asymmetrical, and his nose is broken. Angrest was captured in uniform from a tank while wounded and unconscious at the Nahal Oz outpost on the Gaza border, according to his family. This is hostage taking. You can't capture people and take them back with you and use them as tokens or pawns or tools. It's just hostage taking. It doesn't. You can never. You're just not allowed to do this. I mean, well, apparently you can do it. I mean, nobody's stopping you. But like, this is hostage taking. I'm sorry if it doesn't like fit with your, well, because nobody gives a fuck about what any of the international law says or whatever, but apparently he'd gone out with his team to defend the outpost and the kibbutzim. Tom was abducted in critical condition and is enduring unimaginable suffering, torture during interrogations and inhuman conditions. Despite being severely wounded, he's not returned. He's solely because he's an Israeli soldier. His mother called for the government to complete all stages of the deal. Okay.
Tank. Kidnapped from a tank. Kidnapped from a tank. Coverage has been focused almost exclusively.
Like kidnapped from a tank in what context? During a surprise assault from the Gaza Strip on October 7th, where civilians and soldiers alike were being murdered with no formal declaration of war, with no attempt to distinguish one from the other, with no care or concern for any of the rules of war. Like, but okay.
On the condition of these IDF quote-unquote hostages, rarely making mention of Israel's contribution to their condition, like how they starve out the population of Gaza, which obviously
starving. For years, they've been starving to death now.
Obviously affects all of the people in Gaza, including...
Feels like semantics, POW versus hostage. That's fine, it might, but that's just because you're fucking retarded. I don't know how to talk to you or what to say, right? Like it's semantics in between like sex and rape, I guess. If you're that, or there's a semantic difference between surgery and somebody just stabbing you in the gut. The difference is that if you're engaged in lawful combat combat with somebody and soldiers surrender or you capture base, you're allowed to take those people prisoner so that you can remove them from combat. That's something you're allowed to do. You can't go capture people, especially during times of war, and then hold them as bargaining chips. That's hostage taking. You're not allowed to do that. It's against the rules. You're not allowed to use people as bargaining chips. It's hostage taking. I don't know what else to say. It might be a semantic difference to you, but I mean, so a number of chromosomes some people have. It's a semantic difference. Who cares? Whatever.
The Israeli hostages in Gaza, or the fact that they rain airstrikes on them all day, every day for 16 months straight. Is that good for your health? Is that healthy? The same cannot be said of coverage of the Palestinian hostages. Despite emerging from these Israeli jails with clear evidence of extreme physical abuse, images of the Palestinian hostages are rarely, if ever, shown. The assumption is just granted. It's relied on that they're terrorists, criminals, and whatever else. So whatever happens to them, that's just what happens in jail. The Western media lies in other subtle ways, like burying the lead in stories and deceptively framing headlines. This is especially apparent in coverage of things like ceasefire negotiations. These outlets have consistently framed the lack of agreement to terms as being Hamas's fault, that they won't agree to Israel's terms, but they interestingly decide to use only one definition of the ceasefire agreement, which is Israel's definition, that being one which is only temporary, with no guarantees that the genocide will end after these temporary...
What a stupid reading. Hamas will not sign a permanent ceasefire, you fucking retard. Palestinians don't want to give up the right to fight for their homeland. What a stupid fucking statement. That you think Hamas, you think any Palestinian org would ever sign away completely the right to continue its battle against Israel? He's such a fucking moron. He doesn't even know what the fuck the people they're fighting for.
Pauses. They're not really ceasefires, but in order to frame Hamas as disagreeing with them, that's what they have to call them. The ceasefire that ended up being agreed upon in January was the exact same ceasefire that Hamas had agreed to over 6 months prior. Israel continually sabotaged these negotiations, but if you read any of these mainstream outlets, you wouldn't know that, not until the very end of these articles, at least. The latest reporting on these negotiations continued this trend of misleading coverage, such as this story from early February. The majority of the article, headline included, frames Hamas as the instigator to a potential ceasefire failure. However, both independent observers and Israeli officials themselves acknowledged that it was actually Israel who had already broken the terms of the ceasefire agreement immediately after it was implemented. To anyone with a brain, however, both headline included, frames Hamas. Israeli officials themselves acknowledged that it was actually Israel who had already broken the terms of the ceasefire.
Well, I mean, there's disagreement here. I don't know what the reality is. People, to be honest, there have been times where Israel's broken ceasefires, but both of these sides break ceasefires constantly because they're trying to fucking kill each other always. Okay, but you can't say Israeli officials even agree that it was broken when it's Israeli officials who are speaking on anonymity. Okay, but Kogat, which is an Israeli organization that's responsible for getting aid in and out of the Gaza Strip, they said that it was completely false. So I'm not saying that these three Israeli officials are lying or that it's not true. They truly might believe that, and it might even be accurate. Israel might have broken the ceasefire, but to say that even the Israeli officials admitted this, well, I mean,
ceasefire agreement immediately after it was implemented. To anyone with a brain and eyes, this would be apparent given the evidence we have of these violations, but because these outlets didn't show their readers that and also prioritize the input of party committing genocide, this citation here is crucial for its readers. They need to see this to understand what's happening. But the New York Times waited to mention it until 9 paragraphs in, basically the end of the article. This is a textbook example of bearing the lead, but it also goes beyond that into just a lie, right? The entire article is framed in precisely the opposite way of what this confirmed fact revealed. If the Times weren't running cover for a genocide, the headline of this article would read, "Israel violates ceasefire, confirmed by Israeli officials." Probably the most...
But it's disputed by Israeli officials, because in that exact same paragraph you highlighted, Israeli officials afterwards who were on record literally said it wasn't true. So that wouldn't be the real headline. Jesus. Okay.
Most insane example of this sort of thing is the following headline, once again from the New York Times. Lebanon ceasefire appears to hold despite Israeli strike. If Israel struck, they violated the ceasefire. The ceasefire did not hold. Israel violated it. It's just they appears to hold despite, once again from the New York Times. Lebanon ceasefire appears to hold despite Israeli strike. If Israel struck, they violated the ceasefire.
What were the terms of the ceasefire? Lebanon ceasefire appears to hold. New York Times. Lebanon ceasefire. Oh, wait, this is the headline. Wait, I'm so confused. Wait, what? Hold on.
Confirmed by Israeli officials. Probably the most insane example of this sort of thing is the following headline, once again from the New York Times.
Oh, because this was the headline. Okay, go ahead.
Lebanon's ceasefire appears to hold despite Israeli strike. If Israel struck, they violated the ceasefire. The ceasefire did not hold. Israel violated it. It's just absurd.
Well, but the question is whether or not the ceasefire breaks down and it goes back into full-scale fighting. Israel said it targeted militants headed to a rocket facility, but neither Israel nor Hezbollah seemed keen to immediately return to full-scale fighting. That's the point, right? Despite an exchange of blame between two parties of the deal, Israel and Lebanon, neither of the war's combatants, Israel or Hezbollah, seemed keen to immediately return to full-scale fighting.
Genocide is referred to almost exclusively as the Israel-Hamas war. Like the Nazi Holocaust, Israel's genocide in Gaza has been conducted under the pretext of war, but the genocide aspect, of which there is, again, broad consensus has taken place, is omitted from this framing. Every single article that mentions this so-called war should be immediately citing the expert consensus that it really is not just a war, that it's a genocide.
True.
That doesn't happen, though. Trump recently made a number of statements explicitly supporting U.S. assistance to the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, including land development by U.S. companies. One tool I found helpful to compare these differences in this sort of coverage is Ground News, who are also the sponsor of today's video. Ground News got headlines around, so it's on Distorting and a paid rape and arrest or right channel. Now let's get back to the video. When Israelis and top Israeli officials participated in the right to rape protests we talked about earlier,
yes,
protesting the Israeli right to rape and murder Palestinian hostages, these events were summarized by the New York Times as unrest. They were framed around the protest's effect on the party that was doing the protest, that is, again, the right to rape protest, and not on the fact that Israeli guards raped a Palestinian hostage, it was captured on video, and that the case was clear-cut enough that they actually called for an investigation for once, unlike 99% of previous cases of the IDF abusing, raping, torturing, and murdering.
Well, so this doesn't say that 99% of things aren't investigated. It says that in 99% of cases they aren't charged. Now, is there an undercharging here for IDF soldiers? Probably, based on what I've seen. Probably true, but, you know, it'd be nice to be accurate, but don't let truth get in the way of a good story.
Palestinians. In this article, the guards' actions against the Palestinian hostage are described vaguely and passively as just abuse, and it is not revealed until the very end of the article that the abuse took the form of the guards raping the man with an object. The follow-up story on the prosecution of these soldiers uses this same disgusting framing. Rape with an object is whitewashed in the headline and most of the article as simply just being abuse. This is yet another case of the framing of false neutrality, as this quote-unquote divide between the Israeli right and the Israeli left in this article doesn't actually exist. In reality, all that divide means is that the Israeli right are pro-rape and murder of Palestinian detainees, and the Israeli left thinks it makes their country look bad. There's no real debate going on here. A personal favorite of mine for its sheer absurdity was an article from the New York Times called "It Can Be Lonely to Have Middle-of-the-Road Opinions on the Middle East," which focused on college students that were seeking space for nuanced perspectives on the Israel-Hamas war.
No room for nuance here. It's obviously just the Jews, the Zionists that are bad.
The perspective presented in this article is...
How can you have a nuanced perspective on genocide, bro? What?
One-sided. They talk about extremism in student movements, but the only example they give for this point is that of the extremist Palestinian activists. The New York Times calls it a war with no reference to the numerous credible allegations of genocide. It's harder to justify having a conversation about nuanced opinions of genocide, so they just call it a war. There's no nuance in genocide. There's nothing progressive about genocide. This tendency to falsely frame a genocide with neutrality will often slip into outright endorsement. Recall Israel's pager terrorist attack in Lebanon, when they detonated over 1,000 pagers rigged with explosive.
It's like, this is also why, like, if you're Israeli, you might as well just start fucking actually carpet bombing people, because no matter how targeted, no matter what the number is of militant injuries to civilian injuries there is, which I think in this attack it was insane, right? I don't want to do Israeli propaganda for free. If you want to pay me, pay me. But wasn't it like a handful, like less than 10 civilians injured? Maybe I just didn't see the actual numbers. Was there more than that? This is like I think one of the most targeted fucking attacks of all time, but it's still not good enough. It's never, ever, ever good enough. It's never good enough. If you kill a single civilian, actually, it doesn't matter. Even if you only kill Hezbollah and Hamas, it's still terrorism or genocide. Like, it's unbelievable.
This was a widespread mass terrorist attack that indiscriminately targeted civilians and left hundreds dead and
Indiscriminately targeted? What do you mean? It was literally Hezbollah pagers. That's by definition not indiscriminate. What are you talking about? What?
permanently injured and disfigured, including a number of children.
أول شيء أنا كنت إنه قاعد عم بلعب على التليفون وهي إنه فجرت الساعة.
I think there were a couple of people that were like civil, like I think just civilians. Like I think there was also a story of, wasn't it like a young girl who was bringing her data pager or something and she got killed as well? There were a few for sure, but Jesus.
ثلاثة إنه قبل ما أنا أحملها عم بلعب على التليفون هيك صارت ترن غريبة أنا إنه قمت حملتها حطيت لي ايرور وسهم إنه عشان أكبس أوكي والضوء صار يغبش على الإيه.
We're playing the full clip here of any Muslim death, anybody like that, but okay.
Fatima Abdullah, a 9-year-old girl. At her funeral, as well as other funerals with large crowds of people, Israel detonated more of these explosives. Despite this being a child-killing and maiming indiscriminate terrorist attack in violation of international law, in Western liberal media it was presented as a cool James Bond-style operation.
It was
described using words like ambitious, sophisticated, and daring.
The Israeli spy agency Mossad launched one of the most daring and sophisticated deceptions.
These subhuman, Neanderthal, knuckle-dragging, white dipshits, like Noah too, will sit here and fucking defend Hezbollah, which is what he's doing, as like a legitimate governing party. Hassan, the terrorist supporter as well, who is also very white, don't ever be mistaken by his background or the way he looks sometimes, depending on what he's trying to present. Hassan is also one of the whitest people in the West, okay? Lives in a multi-million-dollar West Hollywood mansion, has to use Google Translate on his phone to speak to his illegal immigrant Spanish-speaking mate, okay? That kind of white person, right? None of these guys will mention how Hezbollah worked with Assad to murder tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Syrians because they were contracted by Assad to do so, or the fact that Hezbollah has led to, like, they own the southern part of Lebanon, and they've even like infiltrated parts of the government. They have like members in their parliament now, and it's just a militant group funded by Iran that just owns part of Lebanese, part of the land in the south. Like, it's just unhinged, but they'll defend Hezbollah no matter what. They love Hezbollah. It's the greatest organization ever, but God, fuck, I hate these people.
In the history of counterintelligence.
An extraordinary act of espionage. An example of Israel's technological prowess. According to the New York Times, the attack restored the aura of Israel's intelligence agencies. Before covering the attack, these outlets always, of course, make sure to mention Hezbollah's U.S. designation as a terrorist organization. Don't worry, guys. They were just terrorists. Nothing to see here. We got the bad guys. They were bad. We are good. Mission accomplished.
Like, relying on a U.S. terrorist designation is retarded. I agree, because fuck the U.S. and fuck our terrorist designations. Arbitrary as fuck. But you don't need to do that. You could just know what Hezbollah is, which is like a paramilitary militant group that's funded by fucking Iran that now has like seats in the fucking Lebanese government that is like hostily taken over the southern part of that country, right? You could just know that. You don't fuck a U.S. terrorist designation. But we're gonna start simping for them now? Is that what we're gonna do? Okay.
And of course, as we've touched on a couple times, lying by omission. That's another thing. With every previous example, you see it. The Israeli hostages receive wall-to-wall coverage with no mention of the fact that the majority of the deaths of these hostages were a product of the Israeli military through airstrikes or firing on hostages while they were waving white flags, or that on October 7th, Israel issued the Hannibal Directive, killing...
That's also, this is just bullshit. I still don't think anything has been... Any credible thing is shown that is the case. So the Hannibal Directive is like, so again, when it comes to Jews, reality is never enough, so you've got to invent these fantastic stories. And so one thing that Jews have is like this, it's called the Hannibal Directive. It's got a sick name and everything. What you do is anytime you think a Jew might even be captured, even if it's a civilian, you gotta fucking murder every single motherfucker, even if it's a fucking civilian, so that none of them get captured. You gotta kill all the civilians. This is the ground on which anti-Semitic losers like Moin Rabbani build the conspiracy theories that are now widely believed by a lot of pro-Pallies, even if they're not upfront with it, that 50% of the casualties on October 7th were just the IDF following the Hannibal Doctrine. Noah might play into that very white, very Western conspiracy by saying a large percentage of the civilians might have been killed by the IDF, but he won't give a percentage because he's also a fucking coward. But it's just... yeah, the idea that there was some huge order to start indiscriminately murdering even civilians if we thought they were being, if Israel thought that they had been captured by fucking Hamas, there's no evidence of this. The strongest thing I saw was I think there was a Haaretz article where I think an anonymous soldier claimed to have heard Hannibal directive or something said on the radio, but it would be astounding if there was only one person in the entire military that heard this. I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
Likely many hundreds of its own civilians as a matter of official...
Oh, he said it. Thank you. There you go. Yes. Okay. You just said hundreds, though, so your imagination.
Firing on hostages while they were waving white flags, or that on October 7th, Israel issued the Hannibal Directive, killing likely many hundreds of its own civilians.
There it is. That's the conspiracy. Yeah.
Matter of official policy. One of the really effective propaganda strategies that results from these lies by omissions comes in the case of genocide allegations. Western outlets rarely, if ever, actually mention the numerous allegations of genocide levied against Israel. The few times that they do, they're often brief, unspecific, and accompanied with equivocation or lengthy citations of Israel's defense against the allegations. When the New York Times covered the Amnesty International Genocide Report, the subheading immediately backtracks into running cover for Israel. Israel rejected the charge, the first of its kind by a major human rights organization, saying it was based on lies. The Times went on to spend more of the article sharing the IDF's defense against the allegations than any of the findings from the act.
Would it even be a bad thing if the Hannibal Directive was as real as big as these people claim? Didn't the Japanese only have like 10 POWs captured in World War II because they killed themselves instead? No. The Hannibal Directive, as it's opined on by the whites of the West, is the idea that if there are civilians that might be captured by evil Arab terrorists, that the IDF should murder the civilians as well. I think the only time there was some discussion about having like some kind of directive like this, I think it was after the prisoner swap of, I always forget his name, Galip Cheat or something, where for whatever fucking reason, Israel traded they traded like 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for a single Israeli soldier that had been captured in, was it 2008? 2006. But again, this isn't like an official Israeli military doctrine or anything like that, and it definitely isn't for murdering civilians in like widespread, but
Actual report. Amnesty International gave us 300 pages of facts about genocide. Israel says that they're just lies. I guess we'll never know what happened here. That's not journalism, that's propaganda. When Human Rights Watch released their report accusing Israel of committing crimes against humanity and genocide through its deliberate deprivation of access to clean drinking water, readers of the New York Times wouldn't have heard about that because the New York Times just didn't report it. That's one of the top human rights organizations in the world, accusing the #1 ally of the most powerful country in the world of the crime of all crimes. And they just forgot? No, they didn't forget. The editorial staff at the New York Times knows that they've helped this. They know that they are complicit in this. So any chance they get to just sort of forget to mention something as consequential as a genocide allegation from the leading human rights group in the world, they'll do it. Of course they will. This tracks with the BBC's repeated genocide denial, evident in repeated instances of reporters condemning or correcting guests for using the word genocide to describe Israel's actions in Gaza.
Israel would deny that a genocide is taking place, saying that it is defending its right to exist. Its very existence, indeed, they would say, is under threat. So there are obviously two sides to this.
This whole issue of right of self-defense.
This isn't going to be anything to do with Ethan, huh? It's just going to be... It's just like a rehashing of all the one-sided tellings of the Palestinian shit. Is that?
Has allowed Israel to inflict the mass murder and mass destruction, what the ICJ now describe as plausible genocide. This
Can I
is
just
not,
say,
this is not an act of
you know what I'm going to have to say. I'm going to say Israel denies that. They say that they were in pursuit of Hamas terrorists who hid behind their own people.
This is a genocide happening in front of our...
Which, by the way, Noah will never bring it up, but the human rights, or the UN, Amnesty, not Human Rights Watch. No, it is Human Rights Watch, I think, and Amnesty International have also reported on like the sometimes they don't call it human shields because Amnesty International sometimes like to invent their own terms for human shields for whatever reason to give cover. But they describe the behavior of hiding behind civilian population, storing weapons in civilian areas or under mosques or whatever, or the fact that like Hamas will go home to their family and then they'll come out from their family homes to fight and everything. Like this is all like, nobody disputes any of this, you know?
We have, that word, as you know, incredibly emotive, and the Israelis, as you know, will be saying that they are targeting Hamas only, that they don't target civilians.
Well, that's simply not the truth, unfortunately.
Planned, military incursions.
Yes, but it's not the truth,
yes, civilians are dying.
Civilians are dying, and the way that the bombs are getting dropped, I don't believe are in a targeted way. Nothing from what I'm hearing on the ground suggests that the bombs have been dropped in a targeted way. Our social media manager, all 5 houses around him got blown up. They estimate 100 people were killed in them.
So questions that you can ask here, like, okay, they're not being done in a targeted way. They're just literally indiscriminately. So we'll ignore like all the numbers and everything else, right? But it's like, okay, where should they be bombing? Like, where are the Hamas bases? Has Hamas designated areas in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip, I guess I should say more specifically? Have they designated safe humanitarian areas? Like, has Hamas told civilians where they can go and be safe at all? Because you know that if you want to talk war crimes and all that shit, which you guys seem to love, a war crime, it is considered an obligation for a party in war to protect their civilian population to the best of their abilities. That means you can't conduct military operations around them. It means that you have to do your best to ensure that humanitarian corridors are provided. Israel has had to do all of that, every single thing, because Hamas does fuck all for the people in Palestine, because they want more civilian deaths.
Yesterday, his house was the last one remaining in the neighborhood. They leveled an entire neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
and I do need to make that qualification, of course, that that it is always denied by the Israelis that genocide is taking place. They say these are strategic planned strikes in Gaza and that they are targeting the militant group Hamas.
But I'm here to let the world know that that's not the case.
Kareem, you've been able to have your say. This is
her Jewish handlers. They got her on that talking point hardcore.
What the Israelis will always say in response to that.
This effort to whitewash and run cover for the genocide has been intentional, of course, and we have the proof. It's been confirmed with direct evidence and testimony, with internal newsroom memos from not only the BBC, but the New York Times as well. And the last thing to talk about is just atrocity propaganda. One of the primary justifications for the genocide in Gaza is that members of Hamas are not just militants, but that they are monsters, pure evil, motivated by nothing more.
Of all the possible arguments you could have gone with, that's the one you're going, the most unhinged. Oh, okay, well, at least we're giving fair cover. At least we're giving, or a fair representation of what the other side's arguments are, right? Why are there so many deaths? Well, let me give you the stalemate on the other side. So they think that Hamas are monsters, demons, Satan spawn, literally coming from an open gate to hell. Okay.
Members of Hamas are not just militants, but that they are monsters, pure evil, motivated by nothing more than the sadistic hatred of Jews. This narrative has been fueled by stories of horrors that supposedly took place on October 7th. Hamas burned babies in ovens.
They burnt babies alive.
They put children and burned them to death.
They cut the breasts off of women.
400 women shot in the genitals, their breasts cut off as terrorists played with their...
This is Robert Schmoley, right? I think all of these claims are correct, but the numbers are grossly exaggerated. I believe that I think it was one child who was burned alive, and then I think there were women whose had dismembered breasts. I believe. I don't remember if I read that from more than one case though. And then there were I think several. The accusation is that they were raped, but their bodies were also burned and they were dead. So it's kind of hard to ask some questions about it.
Their bloody breasts like a football.
Please bring up the 40 beheaded children talking point, which didn't even originate in Israel, by the way. It was a stupid report. I think it was a French reporter that said this 40 beheaded babies thing first, but people like to pretend that it was Israeli propaganda originally, that Israel had originated this claim of the 40 beheaded babies. Please.
Well, they cut off the breasts of women and throw them around.
They beheaded 40 babies.
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children.
They behead children.
They cut the fetus out of the womb of a pregnant woman. They committed a campaign of systematized mass rape.
There is no justification for collective rape.
What happened on October 7th was mass, systematic, planned rape and genital mutilation of women.
All of these claims are false, complete fabrications,
Why is it that we're gonna cite the UN here, but we're not going to believe the UN when the Special Rapporteur to investigate the sexual violence against women, we're not going to believe it when they said that there was evidence of mass rape? We're not going to believe it then? I like the picking and choosing. By the way, I think that picking and choosing what parts of the UN you believe or not, I think it's actually acceptable to do that, but only if you're willing to engage with the underlying material. If you've read the report, then you can say why you agree with some stuff or why you don't agree with other stuff. I think that's perfectly fair. But to not even bother to read them, which I know this retard hasn't, and then to pick and choose which ones you like based on what supports your narrative, that's bullshit.
Stop. No credible evidence has been provided for any of them. Many were shown to be deliberately...
Oh! He's citing the report, where in this very report, they literally do say it. So on different parts of the report, they say that on some things it's hard to prove. The commission has reviewed testimonies obtained by journalists and the Israeli police concerning rape, but has not been able to independently verify such allegations due to a lack of access to victims, witnesses, and crime sites, and the obstruction of its investigations by the Israeli authorities. So this lack of access to victims, part of the concern here on the behalf of the victims, which I would say was later 100% vindicated, was that if any of them come out and speak about it, they're going to receive international attacks from subhuman degenerate fucks like Hassan and other people from... it was, I wish I could remember the other guy's name, Ryan Grimm and two other journalists on that horrible left-wing media site. Fuck, what was it called? That did the Jeremy Scoil, was that it? Jeremy Shaw or something? That did the whole write-up about how all these women are fucking lying. Oh yeah, The Intercept. All the women are lying. That any woman that talks about being raped was a liar. They made it all up, and they did. And a lot of the women that did eventually come forward with stories said that that was one of their concerns in the beginning, and they were right. They should have been concerned about it because people like Noah do say that all of them are fucking lying, and people like Hassan say all of them are fucking lying. By the way, Also, you run into the issue that for a lot of the claims of people who were raped, a lot of this testimony is secondhand because the people are also dead. They're killed afterwards, which this report, by the way, says. He's only quoting the part in the report here that says that it was hard to or impossible to verify some of the stories, but parts of this report say that they believe with high credibility, special report... Intrinsic challenges faced by national authorities, as well as those encountered by the mission team, impacted the gathering, analysis, and verification of information on conflict-related sexual violence. The true prevalence of sexual violence during the October 7th attacks and their aftermath may take months or years to emerge and may never be fully known, given that sexual violence remains a chronically underreported crime in every conflict-affected setting, due, among other things, to trauma, stigma, and fear faced by survivors. As in other conflict-affected contexts, there remains a significant likelihood that the findings of the mission team, in terms of verified violations, only partially reflect the crimes actually committed. A more comprehensive assessment of the occurrence of conflict-related sexual violence in the context of the October 7th attacks would require a fully fledged investigation by competent bodies with adequate time and capacity. This is also a very, very quick investigation. I think they were understaffed. I think they had like 2 weeks or something. But like they go through like each of the areas where sexual violence was alleged. They go through the evidence that they're able to gather here. And then they go through, for some of them, they say it's probably not credible. Like there was at least one Zaka volunteer, I think, who moved bodies or whatever. Now, whether that was malicious or not, it was one thing to be said. But like, based on the examination of available information, including credible statements by eyewitnesses, there are reasonable grounds to believe that multiple incidences of rape, including gang rape, occurred in and around the Nova Festival site during the October 7th attacks. Credible information was obtained regarding multiple incidents whereby victims were subjected to rape and then killed. There are further accounts of individuals who witnessed at least 2 incidents of rape of corpses and women. Other credible sources of the Nova Music Festival site describe seeing multiple murdered individuals, mostly women, whose bodies were found naked from the waist down, some totally naked with some gunshots in the head and or tied, including with their hands bound behind their backs and tied to structures such as trees or poles. Let's see. So for Kibbutz Reem, they have witness testimony gathered for this area is consistent with possible sexual violence. However, these could not be verified in the time provided and would require further investigation. So they didn't feel like there was strong evidence here. The mission team examined several allegations of sexual violence. It must be noted that witnesses and sources with whom the mission team engaged adopted over time an increasingly cautious and circumspect approach regarding past accounts, including in some cases retracting statements made previously. Some also stated to the mission team that they no longer felt confident in their recollections of other assertions that had appeared in the media. So whether they were getting nervous or whether maybe some of them had been exaggerating things or whatever, it's possible. Like, they state all sorts of different things depending upon which people they talked about and which area they talked about. But the ending conclusion here was that there was certainly some sexual violence. They had a high degree of accuracy or a high degree of belief had occurred. There were other stories that they said these are likely untrue completely. Like I said, I believe there was that Zaka volunteer where they said that this story seems to not be true at all. I think at least one, I think he was actually just making shit up. The mission team received credible information about bodies found naked and or tied, and in one case gagged, in some of the kibbutz's destroyed houses and their surroundings. While verification of sexual violence against these victims was not possible, circumstantial evidence, notably the pattern of female victims found undressed and bound, may be indicative of some forms of sexual violence. They were unable to establish whether sexual violence occurred in kibbutz Be'eri. Further investigation may determine whether incidents of sexual violence occurred. For kibbutz Kfar Aza, while verification of sexual violence against these victims was not possible at this point, available circumstantial evidence, notably the recurring pattern of female victims found undressed, bound, and shot, indicates sexual violence, including potential sexualized torture or cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment may have occurred. And then they go through some of the hostages as well, but it's pretty insane that he takes the one part of this report. This was paragraph 26. The commission has reviewed testimonies obtained by journalists. Wait, is this edited? Obtained. Or was this, he might be reading the short version of this? Has reviewed. Oh, he's going by the short version of this, I think. He's not even going by the actual, he's going by, I think, because I think the UN publishes like a short version or whatever first, right? But again, we only cite, he's not taking any paragraphs. He's just taking whatever Z or other Twitter lefties selected. He hasn't opened the full document. That might be true as well, because that squirrel, the Zay Squirrel person, I feel like I remember when we were reading through this at the time, because we did read this entire report, that she was she had either fabricated or was combining or editing some of those paragraphs before she quote tweeted them and then put them on Twitter. That she was editing basically the document and then uploading it in a misleading manner. So this might be one of those, but I don't remember 100%. But it's just so crazy that he's just selectively taking whatever. Wait, hold on. Let me grab some food. 1 second. Okay. Ugh, Jesus.
Fabrications, full stop. No credible evidence has been provided for any of them. Many were shown to be deliberately fabricated, and despite this, they were spread far and wide and ultimately used as rhetorical justification to continue the genocidal onslaught. All of these claims are false, complete fabrications, full stop. No credible evidence has been provided for any of them. Many were
he's just blatantly lying. That's just a blatant I don't want to say misrepresentation. He's just lying about what the UN report said. It's just selective quotes, but okay.
shown to be deliberately fabricated, and despite this, they were spread far and wide and ultimately used as rhetorical justification to continue the genocidal onslaught in Gaza. The first major place this narrative broke was Screams Without Words, a front
And he's running through the same talking points that Ryan Grimm and Jeremy and Hassan on The Intercept did to try to, because they didn't like this article, and so they tried to discredit it hardcore, and so they say all of this is bullshit, basically.
New York Times story in late December of 2023. This story came as Israel's actions in Gaza were starting to receive widespread condemnation from the...
Meaning that the reason why this story came out, when he says that, he's trying to put into your mind the idea that the New York Times and the Jews that control them realized that the image of Israel was getting increasingly bad. So the Jews had to come up with a crazy, wacky story in order to try to salvage Israel's reputation, I guess. And this is the crazy, wacky story that they came up with.
It broke was Screams Without Words, a front-page New York Times story in late December of 2023. This story came as Israel's actions in Gaza were starting to receive widespread condemnation from the international community. The story was thoroughly debunked. The person who wrote it discredited as being a genocidal Zionist with no history of reporting and self-admitting that the New York Times pushed for this story to come to the public despite the lack of credible evidence. The New York Times...
We listened to the whole podcast of the lady that was talking about doing this, and one of her fears was that you have to be very careful when he's saying like no credible evidence. It's very, very, very hard, and he would know this if we were talking in another context, because these guys love to be wokey fucks when it comes to issues like rape. When it comes to things like rape, it's very, very, very hard to prove these cases. Almost all of your proof of rape is going to be by, your only direct evidence is going to be the accuser, the woman generally, who's accusing the other person of raping them, and then circumstantial evidence. That's it. Unless you have other eyewitness accounts to a rape, which is incredibly rare, or video camera footage, which is incredibly rare, right? It's like generally most rape is going to be he said, she said, combined with circumstantial evidence, right? They're called rape kits, but a rape kit is circumstantial evidence. It proves that somebody came in you, hopefully, so you have some evidence, not hopefully as in you get pregnant or whatever. And then it can show like other wounds as well, although they're not necessarily indicative of rape, although they can point to that, but it's all context. It's all of this is circumstantial evidence. So when people like the UN or whatever say like, you know, is there credible evidence or can you prove a thing? These are very, very, very hard cases to prove. And it's even harder when you're proving it in the context of a military, I don't want to say military offense, a terrorist attack. Because during a terrorist attack, if you're going to rape a woman, you can probably kill her too. It's a lot easier to kill a woman than it is to rape her. So if you're in the position where you can rape her or gang rape her, right, you're probably going to kill them afterwards. So it's very, very, very hard to prove these things. Which is like obvious. I remember listening to, I don't know if this was on Hassan's stream or if it was in another thing where Ryan Grimm was like, if there are so many rape victims during this attack, why haven't more of them come forward? And it's like, because they're dead, motherfucker. Are you crazy? They're dead. What do you think they do with them afterwards? You kill them. How many women are getting raped by Hamas and then let go afterwards during a terrorist attack? But...
podcast, The Daily, shelved the episode due to a lack of credible evidence, but the New York Times never retracted the story, which is because they had no real pressure to do so. The false narrative had already prevailed, and that narrative was consistent with the status quo of the American empire, for whom they are running.
The American empire.
Cover. In July of last year, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu repeated some of these lies in front of Congress. He received a standing ovation. 3 weeks later, the White House approved a $20 billion military aid package to Israel. They explicitly cited Netanyahu's visit as one of their motivations for doing so. Atrocity propaganda has consequences. So with that context out of the way about the Gaza genocide and its support from the West and within Israel, the broader media system that allowed it to happen, let's now return to Ethan's video. In the content nuke, you can find just about every type of what we just...
Also, just as a quick thing, I'm sorry, just to recap all of this, okay? There are a lot of people that don't want the Israeli-Palestinian issue to get solved. Because if it does, it shifts a lot of power and stuff going on in the Middle East in uncomfortable ways for different parties. The thing that sucks the most about the Palestinian issue in Israel is that there are a lot of different people that can kind of benefit from it as long as it continues to go on for. So on the bad guy side of things, right, Iran enjoys the fact that there is this splinter point where you can focus so much pressure against Israel to kind of disrupt this Israeli-Saudi alliance, this U.S.-backed group, right, through the Palestinian people. And they do that through the funding of people like Hezbollah or through the funding of people like Hamas. And then a while ago, and more as of recently, through people like the Houthis, okay? Having that issue open for them is beneficial for them. They like it. It's good. It gives them an entry point into fucking with Israel, into fucking with kind of the U.S. interest in that area. On the other side of things, I'll say the good guys, because I am in the United States, but the good guys, or like Israel and Netanyahu, they have an incentive to keep this issue to some extent alive and open as well. As long as Hamas exists in some form, Netanyahu never really has to see any sort of Palestinian state emerge, because they can always say, well, look, Hamas is a terrorist group. What are you going to do? Negotiate with Hamas, right? If Netanyahu really wanted to, and all the Israelis in chat will disagree with me, and I don't give a fuck, rock, eat shit. If Netanyahu really wanted to, or if Israel really wanted to see like some kind of peaceful Palestinian people, there has to be a reunionization or a reharmonization of the governments in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. Anybody that says differently is lying to you. You cannot have a different representative of the people in the Gaza Strip, like Hamas, different from the representatives in the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, or the PLO. We'll just say they're one and the same, effectively. To give the Gaza Strip back to the Palestinian Authority or the PLO, which I think would ultimately probably be beneficial to the Palestinian people, would be a little bit more threatening to the Israeli government, because a united Palestinian people represents a stronger negotiating partner on the other end of disputes over what a final resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian problem should look like. And there are just so many people that have so many interests in this conflict to keep it going that there's just too much on both sides to make that ever happen. Israel continues to expand its presence in the West Bank. Israel continues to have a divided Palestinian population that they never have to negotiate peace against. Israel can just point to terrorist attacks or bad things that people like Hezbollah or Hamas are doing as a justification for not negotiating with the Palestinians. The Palestinians never have to make any real political sacrifices. They can always point to the 67 borders. They can always say that Israel's a terrorist state because look at how evil they are when they're bombing people in the Gaza Strip. They can always say that they're just fighting because they want to have, like an actual resolution that involves a just returning of the land to them, or infinite right of return, which is a whole other topic. And then people in the West, obviously, like it because it's a moral issue. It's just, the annoying thing is that, like, if you actually want the parties to solve this issue, Israel has to make some tough sacrifices, of which they're unwilling to do. And the Palestinians have to make some tough sacrifices, which they're unwilling to do. So neither side wants to make any sacrifices. Everybody around the world is super interested in seeing the conflict continue. And it's just like, it's a crime that these fucking retarded dipshits right here, who are like are like so invested in telling one side of the story to just keep the conflict going forever. Like, it's easy to say that this is a genocide, it's apartheid, I'm glad we're giving the Palestinians a justification to fight forever, when you're not the one picking up a gun to fight. Like, people like you are invested in keeping, people like Finkelstein are invested in keeping this conflict going forever. And it's not going to end in Palestinian favor, right? We've seen that. It was never going to end with them winning militarily. That's just not going to happen. So what the fuck are we doing here? Like, this is stupid, whatever.
Let's now return to Ethan's video. In the content nuke, you can find just about every type of what we just looked at in terms of manufacturing consent. Ethan spreads atrocity propaganda. He shares the Hamas mass rape hoax, the same hoax that was used by the Western media, the US government, and the Israeli government to justify a genocide. He cites the same sources that these parties cite when they go on stage to legitimize more military killing machinery shipments to Israel.
And October 7, last year, Hamas committed horrific acts of sexual violence. Cheryl, I thank you for all your work to bring to light the horrors of this issue and for your film about what happened on October 7.
In his video, Ethan spreads overt misinformation, just straight up lies about Hezbollah and Ansar Allah, or the Houthis, in order to delegitimize their struggle against Israel's genocide. He cites baseless claims from Saudi state propaganda outlets to attack the Houthis. He also cites a documentary about Ansar Allah, which he uses as proof of the claim that they brought back slavery, when the documentary wasn't even about the Houthis. It was about the Yemeni government before the Houthi takeover. He spreads long debunked
When does he think the Houthis started to become popular in Yemen? They were popular before they formed a government. He has no idea. Why did I even ask that question? Just kidding. Sorry.
Which he uses as proof of the claim that they brought back slavery, when the documentary wasn't even about the Houthis. It was about the Yemeni government before the Houthi takeover. He spreads long debunked Nakba denialist talking points that have been used for decades to legitimize Israeli colonization of Palestine. Ethan cites sources that contradict his own claims directly, such as the UN report he claims proves the Hamas mass rapes allegation.
There's a UN report that concludes it happened,
which the report itself denies. He spends 20 minutes.
There's a UN report that concludes it happened,
which the report itself denies.
Denies? The mission team was unable to establish the prevalence of sexual violence and concludes that the overall magnitude, scope, and specific attribution of these violations would require a fully fledged investigation. A comprehensive investigation would enable the information base to be expanded in locations which the mission team was not able to visit and to build the required trust with survivors and victims of conflict-related sexual violence who may be reluctant to come forward at this point. They didn't deny this. They just build on the idea that they had a very limited time to research this. Look at the dates. I was right. It was 2 weeks. The 29th of January to the 14th of February. They were on an incredibly limited timetable here, right? But they felt confident. Overall, based on the totality of information gathered from multiple independent sources at the different locations, there are reasonable grounds to believe that conflict-related sexual violence occurred at several locations across the Gaza periphery, including in the form of rape and gang rape during the October 7th, 2023 attacks. Credible circumstantial information, which may be indicative of some forms of sexual violence, including genital mutilation, sexualized torture, or cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, was also gathered. They didn't have much time to do it. They're just saying they need more time to investigate. They didn't deny it or say that it didn't happen. That's such an insane fucking claim to make. Read the paragraph that you put on the screen.
Rapes allegation.
There's a UN report that concludes it happened,
which the report itself denies. He spends 20 minutes in the video smearing a 19-year-old survivor of the US-backed Saudi genocide in
Why am I watching this trash?
Yemen as a terrorist with zero credible evidence. He makes a number.
Except the kid tweeting out Instagram reeled stories of him walking onto a captured ship. He joked with his son about meeting with the captured hostages and them taking drugs. He's tweeted out extremist propaganda, which doesn't show that he's a soldier, but like the guy on the pike or whatever, the Jew, I guess. I'm sorry, the Zionist. Pretty sure he responded in an Instagram story where he said he was a soldier. Now, I don't know if that was a translation or not, but like, you can say not strong evidence. It's possible the kid was just lying. Like, that's possible. It might even be likely, even maybe, that he's just like full of shit because he just wants the attention from the West. That's possible. But the reason why Hassan brought him on was because he said he was a Houthi soldier. That's why Hassan brought him on. Hassan says as much in the intro to the interview.
Number of transparently false anti-Semitism accusations, like his claim that Israel's ban on new account signups from Israel was anti-Semitic.
Around the end of the year, when people started talking about anti-Semitism on Twitch, Dan Saltman discovered the Israel ban when he was sent the code proving the block happened.
In reality, the ban also affected millions of non-Jews living in Israel and Palestinians in Palestine, as
I love this. This is a nice, tricky little wordplay here. I like this one.
Shown in the evidence he himself cites. The IP ban went into effect in both. Like all these Western liberal outlets, Ethan just takes the State Department line of thinking when it comes to terrorism, which his video is ostensibly a crusade against. True. By his own definition of terrorism, both the US and Israel are the largest terrorist organizations in the world, given their history of killing millions of innocent civilians across the globe. His focus is not on them, though, rather the groups that they consider to be terrorists, aka, the bad guys. He actually
every single video that you make on anything bad should just be about the United States always. True.
There's those exact words. He says they're the bad guys.
They are a designated terrorist group by the US, by the EU. These guys are clearly the bad guys.
The entire video is kind of a lie by omission, simply because of everything we just went over. How none of it is a factor, how none of the people viewing the video that are unfamiliar with what's happening would ever come away with his video knowing the full picture, knowing some of the very valid reasons why someone like Hassan might be critical of Israeli atrocity propaganda.
Ah, there it is, right? There's always an understandable reason why Palestinians do what they do and why they're super critical of Israel, but it never goes the other way. There's never a reason. I guess the mind of a Jew is just totally inexplicable. Like a normal human being can't understand the depravity of the Jew rat, I guess. It's just like it's impossible to understand. Funnily enough, I would say it should have been an instantly disqualifying statement, but it was one of several disqualifying statements that pop culture person Finkelstein, one of the statements he made in our debate, that Finkelstein said, of all the atrocities, of all the people in human history, Finkelstein claimed he couldn't even imagine the mind of an Israeli. It was impossible. He couldn't even get into the mind of an Israeli Jew. It was impossible to even fathom how they could do the crimes that they've done. Fuck, what did he say? I couldn't get... Wait, what did he say exactly? Did he say into the head?
You don't understand.
For a
Israeli
historian,
society.
I
You
don't want to understand
how it
Israeli society.
You
If you want to know the
understand how
truth,
it works.
I don't want to. I don't want to get inside their heads.
That's the problem.
Like, bro, you can't speak either of the languages. You can't read any original documents in Arab, let alone in Hebrew. He's engaged with almost none of the English material outside of the propaganda that he consumes. How can you even possibly claim to get inside of the mind of a Palestinian and understand a Palestinian? You can't even get into the mind of an Israeli? You can't understand an Israeli? These are Western people, Western conceived nations that are more similar to you culturally and everything else than any Arab culture, which, you can't even speak any of the fucking languages of. So your understanding of it is dog shit at best. And you're going to say you can't even imagine the mind of an Israeli citizen? That's just an unbelievable claim for a wannabe historian to make.
Understand Israeli society. If you want to know the truth, I don't want to. I don't want to get inside their heads.
That's the problem.
90% of
a good historian tries to get into the heads of the various protagonists.
There's a limit. I agree. There's probably a limit, right? If we're going to start talking about like Unit 731 or whatever the Japanese shit, or maybe like the minds of like a serial rapist, murderer, pedophile, cannibalist. Okay, fine. There's a limit. But you can't get into the minds of an Israeli citizen. Really? Of all the things in history to study, Israel's the most impossible to understand?
There's a limit. When 90% of Israelis think that Israel's using enough or too little force in Gaza, I don't want to get inside that head.
He's quoting that same poll that Noah Dipshit quoted from 1 month after the conflict began, by the way. But yeah, it's just a fucking joke, dude. I hate these people.
Or might support groups like the Houthis for their heroic actions in the Red Sea against a genocidal regime. The biggest...
But they weren't heroic actions. They were terrorist attacks against ships that had nothing to do with Israel, right? He's just repeating the same terrorist propaganda.
Hassan might be critical of Israeli atrocity propaganda, or might support groups like the Houthis for their heroic actions in the Red Sea against a genocidal regime. The biggest issue, I think, is that Ethan manages to do all of this while still calling himself a stalwart ally to the Palestinians.
I've been a stalwart supporter of the Palestinian cause for many years.
This is what makes liberal Zionism so insidious. He is using humanistic appeals to things like peace and safety, but doing so in a way that distracts from the actual source of the problem. The problem is Zionism and the genocidal Israeli state.
Yes, at least he's honest. They're more honest about it now. They're braver, I guess. The problem is that Jews cannot live in the Middle East. That's that's been the issue from 1880 onwards, or at least from 1920 onwards. Jews should not be allowed to live in the Middle East. Or if they do want to live in the Middle East, it has to be in an Arab majority state where they're subjugated by the Arab population. That's the only way that they'll ever be allowed to do it. Be honest about it, at least, coward.
Tracks from the actual source of the problem. The problem is Zionism and the genocidal Israeli state. That is what's causing these problems. And people that might otherwise be able to understand if presented with the facts of the situation are simply led astray by people like Ethan, where a more right-wing Zionist might put off the average liberal with extremist claims and overtly genocidal language. A liberal Zionist draws you in with the facade of empathy. He wants to appear empathetic, as if he cares for these people, as if he doesn't ascribe to a genocidal ideology. So, in order to do that, he has to lie. And
remember, the genocidal ideology is Zionism. And Zionism is definitively, it's defined as just the belief that Jews should have a state of their own. Right now, I guess it's Israel. Maybe they'll get Montana in the future. But that's what he means when he says genocidal ideology.
Roping in otherwise progressive people into a death cult. Aside from this video being a nonsensical genocidal propaganda piece, it's also entirely unoriginal. The video is a culmination of a months-long campaign against Hassan and all these other creators and Twitch, the company, to smear them as terrorists and anti-Semites and get people, in trouble. The campaign began as a response to the suspension of the live streamer Asmongold. Asmongold made some comments that explicitly...
Really? Ethan's campaign against Hassan Piker, who's been harassing him for over a year, began to defend Asmongold?
Justified Israel's genocide of Palestinians in Gaza.
I'm not going to cry a fucking river when people who have genocide that's baked into their laws are getting genocided. They come from an inferior culture. I don't feel bad for them. I don't feel sorry for them. I don't care. I don't support them.
Following his suspension for these comments, a community of large content creators, most notably the live streamer Destiny, along with his fan base, rushed to Asmongold's defense, whitewashing and justifying his comments.
Pretty sure I thought I criticized those comments. It ooh, that's not a good comment. Anytime you do the racial inferiority stuff, probably not good. And then I think we listened to the fuller clip. We're like, is there more context here that kind of bails him out? And then it's like, I think I kind of understand what he said, but not a good look, not good. Somebody can find my original comments if you want, but
with his fan base, rushed to Asmongold.
I probably should have retweeted this guy, though. But I guess that's my full opinion on the topic. It's not like I stream or talk about anything as well, but...
Gold's defense, whitewashing and justifying his comments.
Meanwhile, Asmongold gets a 15-day ban for having a spicy take on the war.
So you have someone like Asmongold who breathes the wrong direction, says the wrong thing, and instantly gets banned.
In this situation, one could, if they were to extend the charitability, could say that Asmongold was probably referring to extremists in the Islamic religion.
I don't know if he was. However, I will say that Asmongold's take is not as extreme as Hassan's take. The idea that Palestinians, or more specifically, the idea of like Palestinian liberation has baked into it these like martyrdom ideas, or this idea of like the other side can be killed or whatever, right? Hassan himself has supported and said on stream the concept of settler babies, right? On which all violence is authorized. That's the next logical step of that, settler babies. The idea that one side shouldn't respect the other, who's constantly trying to kill them, right? Who's pouring rockets into their country constantly. That statement is less ridiculous than even Noah's statement here about the brave Houthi souls who were fighting a genocidal regime with their brave actions, out in the ocean. That's Asmongold's statement is less extreme than that, which I think was the main frustration that was being expressed, maybe in poor words, for sure. Dan's statement here, I think, is probably not the best. I probably shouldn't have retweeted that guy, but it's more just like, fuck Twitch. What the double standard here is insane.
Extremists in the Islamic religion.
The case of Asmongold's suspension from Twitch was then weaponized against these pro-Palestine voices, most notably Hassan, in an effort to get him deplatformed. To do this, they compiled a number of short clips taken from Hassan's live streams, using them to accuse Hassan of things like supporting and promoting terrorism.
Which he does. He supports and promotes people. He literally says it, that he likes, even though the U.S. designated him as a terror order, he likes people like Hezbollah or Nasrallah, the old leader of Hezbollah, who got rip bozoed. He compares them literally to it's ANC, right? And Mandela. Like, he literally compares Nasrallah to Mandela and says, oh, well, the U.S. designated him as a terrorist too, right? Not as in like, is the U.S. right or wrong all the time, but in like a favorable light. He literally does. I'm pretty sure Ethan shows an example of this in his fucking video. But
allegedly denying October 7th sexual violence and making
You've just done that. You just said that there was no mass rapes or anything, right? That's a lie. That's a total fabrication by, I guess, Israel and the UN.
And promoting terrorism, allegedly denying October 7th sexual violence and making anti-Semitic statements. Each one of the clips and their associated accusations can be traced back to prominent posts on Destiny's subreddit. Some of the clips were sourced from videos that criticized Hassan from well over a year ago.
Let's say that that's true, which I don't know if every video, I know that I'm the origination of every single anti-Hassan thing on the internet, or I guess, maybe that one, what was it, some black guy who said that we would have socialism by now if it weren't for Destiny? Maybe he's right. Maybe I am the one stalwart, okay, holding up all of liberalism on my fucking back, and Israel, I guess. Then debunk them, or what's incorrect about them. Like we keep saying, taken out of context, the clip is just saying that Hassan supports Hezbollah. And then you're saying it's taken out of context. And then you go on to provide a whole bunch of reasons why you should support Hezbollah. So then it's not taken out of context. What are you talking about?
Subreddit. Some of the clips were sourced from videos that criticized Hassan from well over a year ago. These clips were initially hosted on a website created by a member of the campaign called HamasPiker.com. Soon after, another website was created, DanClancySucks.com, a reference to the CEO of Twitch, Dan Clancy. Another goal of this campaign was to get him fired from the company. This site also hosts all of these clips with their associated allegations: anti-Semitism, terrorist promotion, and rape denial. Eventually, several major YouTubers in the usually apolitical commentary sphere made videos that signal boosted these allegations to millions of viewers. Most of these videos used the same clips, many of them directly citing the smear campaign's website.
There's a website known as DanClancySucks.com.
Or there's also a website that's been created called DanClancySucks.com that goes over it all.
Another website, Advertise on Twitch, shows a collection of ads playing before the dishonestly framed clips we've looked at, and the contact information of the companies
give one example, please. Spam this in other chat. I am ordering you to brigade. Spam it in chats, spam it in YouTube comment section, spam it on Reddit. Whenever somebody says this thing, Hassan is taken out of context. How? What part? In this hour video, maybe we'll get to one part of this. Maybe he'll bring up one example. Neither Hassan nor any of his dick sucks nor any of his orbiters, not a single person has ever given a single claim ever that has been taken out of context. I just say out of context. What's been taken out of context? Which one? Oh, so Hassan doesn't support Hezbollah. Is that true? Oh, he doesn't support the Houthis. Is that true? Oh, he doesn't support Hamas. Is that true? Oh, he doesn't deny the mass rape. Oh, no. All of these things are true. None of these are taken out of context. You've defended half the opinions that you claim are now taken out of context in this video.
Is provided. It auto-loads a preset email with just one click, allowing participants in the campaign to mass spam these companies with the related smears. There were several motivations behind this campaign. There were direct material incentives on YouTube for the past...
Yeah, why spend 40 minutes justifying all the things that you're now saying Hassan only defends in out-of-context clips?
With the related smears. There were several motivations behind this campaign. There were direct material incentives. On YouTube for the past few years, there's a big industry that's exploded in popularity, and it's based on a simple concept. Hassan, bad. Hassan Piker is bad, and he's dumb, and bad and a terrorist, probably. We can call this the Hassanabi dunk video industrial complex. It's common for YouTubers during low view months to join in on the fun and make these types of videos, taking short clips from Hassan's...
Bro, no offense, but you're not that big. And even in the commentary community, in terms of like, bro, you're linking a video with 37,000 views. Come on, you really think this is the go-to? Now, Hassan has provided a lot of yummy milk, I guess, over the past few months at least, as he started to spiral more and more and fight with H3H3, Asmongold, and ultimately me, always, because it's me behind all these people. He's just shadowboxing me in 7 different forms, I guess.
Thousands of hours of live streaming to misrepresent what he's saying, usually parroting the exact same talking points.
Misrepresenting what? What's being misrepresented?
Types of videos, taking short clips from Hassan's thousands of hours of live streaming to misrepresent what he's saying.
What's being misrepresented?
Parroting the exact same talking points they're getting from the same YouTubers in...
What's the debunk to any of these talking points? Just one of these talking points. Debunk one of them.
The same community. They're watching each other's videos and making each other's videos. It's kind of like a perpetual cycle of dumb guy slop. It's interesting to see YouTubers that typically cover TikTok drama and gaming content randomly giving their opinions on genocide and geopolitics.
No one's giving their opinion on genocide and geopolitics. They're giving their opinion on Hassan supporting terrorist groups, with which you've justified in this video.
That's the result of such an ecosystem. It's not about the politics. It's about making money by attacking a guy they don't like because the guy in question happens to be a political content creator. They have
say Arab. Say Arab, even though he's Turkish. Please say it. Just say it because he's Arab. Say it because he's a person of color. Please say it. Say it. Please say it. Or Muslim or whatever. Please say it. Come on. Yes.
The politics.
Do it. I'm ready.
Attacking a guy they don't like because the guy in question happens to be a political content creator. They have to try to do politics. It's really funny to watch, honestly. It's also wild because the political content creator in question is an anti-genocide content creator, and the arguments they're attacking him for are anti-genocide arguments.
He's anti-genocide. Why didn't we just say that in the beginning? Ethan, you fucking retard. Just call yourself anti-genocide and then you're good, dog. You can literally defend whatever the fuck you want. Just you have to make sure you call yourself anti-genocide, bro. And then you can never be defending genocide.
So these creators, they're positioning themselves in opposition to him and his arguments, de facto positioning themselves on the pro-genocide side. Anti-genocide is pro-genocide. It's quite the precarious predicament they've placed themselves in. Do they realize it? No. Do they care?
And if Ethan calls himself anti-genocide, then when Hassan debates him or argues against him, then that makes Hassan anti-genocide, which makes him pro-genocide. Oh my God, we did genocide math. We got there. We did debate bro arithmetic.
Probably not.
But like today, we're here to debate whether rape is good or bad. What's your position, Noah? Well, I came here anti-rape. Funny, because I came here anti-rape. In a way, that kind of makes you pro-rape, right? Because you've brought anti-rape arguments to me, and I'm already anti-rape, so now you're anti-rape, so now you're pro-rape? Boom! Got him.
But that's what's happening. That's what they're doing. The success of Ethan's video, which garnered over 3 million views in its first month, is a testament to the algorithmic viability of Hassan bad content. Get in front of a politically illiterate American audience and call a pro-Palestine influencer a terrorist.
Which is, by the way, funnily enough, that's literally Hassan's stated goal, is to do agitprop. Hassan literally says, my goal is to get in front of liberals who don't know any better and propagandize them, which is why I hide my power level so much. It's so funny that you're projecting that onto Ethan. But
promoting hateful terrorist music videos,
terrorist propaganda videos,
terrorist propaganda video.
Collect big.
Is he going to talk about the terrorist propaganda video they're referencing, by the way, which was a propaganda video by a terrorist organization? Is he going to reference that, or do you think not?
Big fat AdSense check. That's how it goes. And Ethan knew it would do well too, and made sure to get a sponsor for the video.
Thank you to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video.
Which was a VPN company that happens to be owned by an Israeli billionaire with a history of funding and supporting the idea.
Oh my God. Fuck me, dude. Do I need to check the fucking CEO of every single company that I take a sponsor from? Holy shit. Really? We're going to this level now? Oh my God.
Yeah, he's not a Zionist though, apparently. Apparently he's not a Zionist and he's pro-Palestine.
I've been a stalwart supporter of the Palestinian cause for many years.
A few years ago, Destiny...
How does that make him not a Zionist? What? You can be a Zionist and be a supporter of the Palestinian people as well. You don't have to want to have the complete and wholesale dissolution of the state of Israel. But, that's whatever.
was banned from Twitch. Since then, he has repeatedly attempted to be reinstated on the platform, and the latest attempt by using the campaign was probably the closest he's ever been in terms of putting pressure on the platform.
We're tired. What? You think I'm getting unbanned? Attacking the platform even more? This is like internally inconsistent. What?
Of your site, changing the rules every week. Nobody knows what's going on. Get your shit together, unban Destiny, and fucking make a site that people actually want to go to.
Dedicated the last 2 weeks of my life.
It was the closest I've ever, but they were microseconds away from unbanning me. And at the last moment, Hassan was able to swoop in and beg them to keep me off the platform. Like, what are we talking about?
Basically to Steve's cause.
You're talking about the Twitch thing?
Yeah, destroying Twitch.
Some of the motivations for the campaign are political in nature, though, obviously. You know, Hassan Piker is one of the most prominent pro-Palestine voices on YouTube, and this campaign has been orchestrated by Zionists. The website that started this campaign, HamasPiker.com, doubled as a donation page for a prominent Zionist organization. Since learning about the existence of Israel on October 7th of 2023, Destiny has positioned himself as its #1 cheerleader, showing up at debates to defend the genocidal apartheid state using Zionist talking points and denying that a genocide is taking place. On the Lex Friedman Israel-Palestine debate, Destiny...
By the way, on the Lex Friedman Israel-Palestine debate, all of the notes that I took for this, all the research is public. Not only is it all public, but if you look at the debate prep that I did for this debate, and you actually look at the outline that I had made, all of the sources in here are your favorite cuck sources. I made sure to try to avoid any Zionist sources as much as possible, okay? We've got quotes from original people, from the PLO, from the 1964 PLO covenant. The PLO, they're not Zionist, right? Hold on, maybe I have some other Zionist things in here. Wikipedia article. Let's see. These are examples of... So Wikipedia is Zionist, even though it's actually super edited by pro-Pallies. Oh, these are examples of other civilian population transfers. Hold on. Okay. According to Israeli and Palestinian sources, NBC News, we'll call that Zionist, I guess. I-24, is this French? This is just for the wealth of these people. For living conditions, CIA.gov. Oh, that's Zionist. Well, I don't know. Hold on. Now, keep in mind, I don't actually dispute any of these facts, but maybe it's the war crimes part. Hold on. Haaretz, that's a left-leaning source, but it's also Israeli, so he might include Haaretz as being a Zionist. These are quotes from the ICJ judges that filed the criminal justice case against Israel on behalf of, or when South Africa brought the case for genocide against Israel. That's quotes from them. I think gold is a quote here. Gender-based violence research from, this is the United Nations. I believe that we like that, right? The United Nations, when they talked about violence in the Gaza Strip. So this is a good, nice, friendly. Participants in the Great March of Return. My source here is People for International Humanitarian Law. Was this by Amnesty International? But these are nice, non-biased. It's not a Israeli source here, okay? Just like international law people. That was an Israeli news anchor. These have to do with individual stories of a dude related to the... Hold on one second. Okay, these are Norm quotes from Norm's website. These are Security Council resolutions from the UN. Let's see. Okay, these are the quotes. All right, 50-50. If you don't like my sources, though, you can go through them. You can argue with me if you want. We've got UNRWA in here for the Palestinians. We've got the actual concessions that were being asked for from the Palestinians, the actual documents. You can read them yourself. You don't have to go by a summary about the right of return. We've got quotes from the Goldstone Report, which everybody says is anti-Israeli. We've got Amnesty International quotes. We've got another. These are from an Amnesty International report having to do with Cast Lead in 2009. More Amnesty International stuff. Like my whole perspective, especially if you're going to make all these videos and shit, everything is like, this is literally like a guide for the debate, or my hope for what we would actually talk about. Like, if anything in here is bullshit or full of like absolute misinformation, all these notes are public. You can just go through it and tear it apart if you want. Like, it's all in here. But whatever. Okay, this has been on the internet for like, what, over a year? How long ago was this debate? And nobody's bothered to fact check me on anything, but my bad, I guess.
He justified Israel's slaughter of 4 Palestinian children in the Gaza beach bombings using talking points plucked directly from IDF spokespeople.
Those kids weren't just on the beaches as often articles. Those kids were literally coming out of a previously identified Hamas compound that they have operated from. They literally
I'm not going by quoted, I'm not just quoting just a random spokesperson. Like, they had their explanation for what, for the people that had been targeted. There's, I don't remember the name of the wharf or whatever. But, I mean, they had pictures, they had a video, they had the evidence that they laid out and that they had presented. I mean, the alternative story, first of all, Hamas didn't say anything in response, so I don't know what you want me to take from that. And the alternative explanation is just that Israelis were flying around drones one day just looking for children to kill, I guess. But I mean, if you believe what he said so far, I guess that makes sense, you know?
Mr. Borelli, with all due respect, you're such a fantastic moron. It's terrifying.
I left Finkelstein's iconic response in there because he is 100% correct.
And I love how the longest quote that you leave from Finkelstein is just him calling me stupid. Nice, good one.
Events of that day were witnessed by dozens of journalists. There's no real dispute as to what happened, except from, of course, the party that slaughtered the children, which is Israel, and in turn, its propagandists.
Like what you're saying doesn't even make any sense because you don't even know the original event. There's no dispute about what happened because people witnessed the deaths. The contention isn't whether or not people died. The contention is what was the motivation or what happened. Why did that event happen? That's the contention. Like, okay.
But happened except from, of course, the party that slaughtered the children, which is Israel, and in turn, its propagandists, like Destiny.
A group of boys, cousins, playing on the beach. Now, we're running for their lives. Until seconds later, another shell hit. Israel claimed it was firing on Hamas militants at the port, but the dead were 4 young boys.
He's also explicitly called for the genocide of Palestinians.
Honestly, I'm pro-genocide.
Oh, and then our pre-October 7th, nice base.
Like, it sounds really shitty, but like, I think that Israel should just drop its fucking borders about where to.
Are we going to play the rest of this quote here where I say, realistically, there's probably no good solution. It seems like one side is going to kill the other, and that's the only way this conflict ends, or are we just going to cut it off here?
Is now, and basically, Palestinians can go live in another place. That's really shitty, but like, that's about where I'm at.
It's this guy and his community who are the source for every one of the arguments that Ethan makes in his video. Do stalwart advocates for Palestinians normally collaborate with advocates for Palestinian genocide? No, they do not, in my opinion. Destiny's podcast co-host Dan Saltman, the other main driver behind this campaign and the one spearheading the creation of these smear websites, is also a Zionist. Saltman promoted pro-Israel organizations like the ADL and stopped anti-Semitism. And
Israel should just get their own child soldiers. Why? They've people like this guy have already hopped on board with the baby settlers argument. So you can kill Israeli children, it's fine, doesn't matter.
Zionist politicians like Richie Torres, who shared and boosted the campaign, he consistently weaponizes Zionist talking points, like asserting that any reference to Zionism is actually just coded anti-Semitic language, the implication there being, of course, that criticizing Israel and Zionism is inherently anti-Semitic. That's a very common Zionist tactic. It's like the Zionist tactic.
Where can we find a link to the Finkelstein debate notes? I don't know. It's probably on destiny.gg/notes. Debate prep, Finkelstein and Rabbani, and then debate outline. So this isn't the totality of my research. These are just the topics that I wanted to move through, but we didn't really talk about anything of substance because Finkelstein is a hack fuck, and I didn't realize it. And Rabbani is just a blatant terrorist supporter, but
in the West, at least. Perhaps the most significant motivation, though, and indicative of the sort of unserious nature of this campaign, is just spite. These people all seem to have deep personal vendettas against Hassan and these other creators that should give one pause when considering the seriousness of the campaign that they're...
Think about it. You know, what are the criticisms that I levy against Hassan, right? I mean, there's pages of notes that I've taken, and there's hundreds of hours now of footage of me reading, researching, putting together arguments, and having debates on it. What does Hassan say about us? Well, Ethan's kids are sick from crawling through poop, and he needs to take a break, and he's mentally unwell, and he needs to get therapy because Sex Pestany and Diddy GG are divorcelling his fucking mind from reality, and all these other people are part of a crazy sex cult of people that hate me, and like... Come on, bro. Hassan is actually like a drama slop YouTuber here when it comes to responding to any of these claims. Hassan doesn't even do politics anymore. He does drama slop. That's all he does. If you go in on any of Hassan's political opinions, he's going to look at you and go, oh, this guy... Isn't he the guy who tweeted out one time, blah, blah, blah? Oh, this guy, isn't he the guy who's friends with what? Like, Hassan is incapable of responding with substance to any of the arguments levied against him. Find an example of it. I would love to see a single example in the last 12 months of Hassan responding with substance to any critique against his political position. I'm so curious. Does it exist?
Running.
God, he's so cringe. He's like such a cringe loser. I would pay we'd raise $1 million to send this dude to go fight in Yemen, and then all of us would volunteer for him. Holy shit, he's such
in response to him defending the fucking Houthis that are accused of causing tens of thousands of starvation deaths of children? But maybe that's all lies, I guess.
Cringe.
Destiny has for almost 5 years just obsessively talks about Hassan on his channel.
Obsessed. Yes, he's just obsessed. Don't talk about the largest political streamer on Twitch. Well, sorry, second largest now, right? Maybe third largest. Who knows anymore? Now that Asmongold has taken over, right? They're just obsessed. That's it. Yes. And I'm going to be obsessed for responding to this as well. Yes.
Video after video about him. The frequency of these videos increased after Destiny was banned from Twitch. In the span of time since then, he has uploaded almost 80 videos about Hassan out of a total of like 450 videos. So that's at least 1/5.
I've uploaded 450 videos between my 3 YouTube channels in the last 2 years. Damn, August. And he's got a pay cut. I would have thought it would have been over 1,000 videos, but you know.
His working life spent talking about Hassan. In contrast, in the same span of time, Hassan has uploaded over 1,200 videos, and he's talked about Destiny a total of 5 times. 4 of them have...
Like, Hassan talked about me 5 times yesterday. What is this framing? It's actually unhinged.
Like, I genuinely think Destiny's unhealthy obsession over the course...
I need a break. Like, come on! Really? No, come on! Seriously? Five times! I got lucky and I hit number 6.
Have come in the last few months while covering Destiny's role in this smear campaign and the credible allegations of sex crimes against him. So that's less than 1% of his coverage. This isn't an internet beef. Hassan has a stalker. With Ethan, I feel like I can kind of spot the moment
yes,
that's
true. Stalker, gaslighter, manipulator, crazy maker, all the words. Just use all of them. Bro, come on.
He started going into this direction, which was the moment that people started calling him racist for saying racist stuff. It was one argument he made where he compared Jewish Voice for Peace anti-Zionist activists to capos.
They're
oh
Jewish
my God.
collaborators with fucking Nazis.
Ethan, don't do that, please. Don't say that the Jews' Voice for Peace are akin to capos. Like, that's...
I'm telling you that the mere existence of Jewish voices is not a leg to stand on. I don't understand that.
The chat started calling him a Zionist freak.
Like, that's a fair point. You can't use token figures to try to claim that they speak for an entire group of people. You know this. Everybody knows this. But apparently it's okay when we do it for Jews, I guess.
Because that's a Zionist freak thing to say. And then since then, he's sort of constructed an entire mind prison around the idea that he's not racist, and anyone calling him racist is actually the real racists. Because Hassan's community is politically oriented and is able to spot the racist rhetoric in question.
True. The scholars in Hassanabi's audience. Yes, true.
Means they're all extremists, and Hassan is leading them, so he's an extremist. And that Hassan and them are all the problem, and that he's a perfect angel, which is the direction he's taken, it seems like.
My only crime is wanting a 2-state solution instead of one, and thinking it's not okay to kill Israeli civilians. That's it. That's why they're calling me a Nazi Zionist.
And now he's just totally gone off the rails. He spends most of his time cowering in fear behind Instagram stories that people can't respond to.
Because he's not on Twitter, so he makes What do you mean they can't respond to it? When you literally linked...
He's just totally gone off the rails. He spends most of his time...
You're literally linking tweets about the stories. What the fuck are you talking about? They're clearly people are responding. What do you mean?
Cowering in fear behind Instagram stories that people can't respond to.
Cowering in fear? Hassan is literally so fucking afraid. This motherfucker has to send people into his stall before he fucking takes a shit because he thinks I'm hiding in there about to fucking get him. Come on, bro. You talking about hiding in fear?
One of the uploads on his personal YouTube channel in the last number of months have been targeted towards Hassan. He spent most of his live podcast talking about Hassan and calling him a terrorist and whatnot.
What is this? Bro, I have not seen a single one of his fucking Instagram stories. I didn't know he was posting about me this much. Oh my God, every day?
I didn't know, he says, as he fucking... I'm sure that he's not obsessively checking all of these things constantly, but okay.
Every single day? No.
There was that one Instagram story where Ethan Klein was having to evacuate due to the wildfires or something, and he managed to make the post about Hassan and about how Hassan probably thinks it's awesome that his house might burn down while his family is in the background trying to evacuate the wildfires. Just wild. Ethan Klein has repeatedly denied any association with this campaign and Destiny or his community. That may have something to do with the recent credible allegations that Destiny is a sex criminal, but this is false. Ethan has been caught on his live podcast browsing the Destiny subreddit for arguments to use to attack Hassan. Leaked Discord logs show Dan Saltman admitting to exchanging emails with Ethan and the H3 team personally during the campaign. And even if there wasn't evidence of direct communication, the far more important connection is that Ethan is saying the exact same things, using the same out-of-context clips that everyone else used to call his...
Out of context? What thing was out of context again? Well, we're 59 minutes in. We still got 4 minutes. Maybe we'll get to one of those out-of-context clips. They're coming up.
On a terrorist or whatever. It's been a group effort. That's just what it is. So just a few final thoughts here. Zionism is Nazism. It's an ethnic supremacist.
Oh, okay. Zionism is Nazism. Oh, that's what we were arguing about. Gotcha. Okay.
Or whatever. It's been a group effort. That's just what it is. So just a few final thoughts here. Zionism is Nazism. It's an ethnic supremacist, expansionist, colonial ideology. You can't have Zionism without genocide and ethnic cleansing. That's the end goal of the project. It's what it is. Palestinians are there, and for the Zionist project to be complete, they have to go. Starve them out, bomb them, destroy everything they need to live. Those are the methods. Those are what they're employing as we speak. And like Nazism, Zionism cannot be defeated through reform or debate. It must be destroyed from the outside through effort.
Destroy the country of Israel. Based. Yes, true. Because remember, Nazism was the official governing party of Germany. The only way to defeat it was to take apart that entire governing party, right? So the whole government in Israel needs to be dismantled, but also, what, the borders redrawn true? Like, what else needs to happen?
It's made by the Palestinian people, the Palestinian resistance, and coalitions of allies.
Oh, the resistance, yes.
It must be destroyed from the outside through efforts made by the Palestinian people, the Palestinian resistance, and coalitions of allies. As history has shown, the downfall of these kinds of racist ideologies is possible, but Zionists cannot be a part of this process. They're Zionists. They uphold Zionism by spreading Zionist propaganda and spending all their time and effort attacking anti-Zionists, even as those anti-Zionists are actively fighting against a genocide that Zionism is the ideological pretext for. In the case of liberal Zionists like Ethan Klein, using his weird personal Zionist crash out as a jumping off point to educate people about the ideology that he adheres to is a great use of time, I think. And Badam Panada has done a fantastic job with that. His videos have reached pretty wide audiences and exposed them to the reality and history of the genocidal Zionist project. That's a really good thing. It's a really important thing that he's doing, and I think many of you can probably also help out with that. Most of you have smartphones and cameras and TikTok, so go ahead, start posting about it, spread the word. Aside from being a morally good thing to do, it's also becoming sustainable. You know, it's algorithmically viable. The Ethan Klein crash out industrial complex is booming, and we can harness it as a propaganda machine to expose Zionism for the genocidal ideology that it is. You may have the feeling, as I often have, that the history books will look back upon these times and those who supported the Gaza genocide with shame and horror. The only problem with that is that these people feel no shame. They're here to make money and to convince themselves that they aren't evil.
Oh, speaking of feeling no shame, I think that tweet did come explicitly from the squirrel. Breaking, the UN just released its first actual investigation into October 7th, an ongoing Gaza genocide by Israel. It concludes that though there was violence against women, there is no proof of any rape, let alone mass rape. That was her tweet. But I don't think this even existed. This paragraph, I don't think this existed anywhere. I think she cut together this thing on her own. And you can see even on 95 here, there's been some stuff cut. For 95 here, she has, the commission did not find credible evidence, however, that militants received order to commit sexual violence, and so it was unable to make conclusions on this issue. That's what she has from point 95 here. And then I think I screenshot and quote from that thing. The commission identified patterns indicative of sexual violence in several locations and concludes that Israeli women were disproportionately subjected to these crimes. The attack on October 7th enabled perpetrators to commit SGBV, sexual group something violence. And this violence was not isolated, but perpetrated in similar ways in several locations and by multiple Palestinian perpetrators. The commission did not find credible evidence, however, that militants received orders to commit sexual violence, and so it was unable to make conclusions on this issue. However, inflammatory language and disbelief around sexual violence observed with both parties risks silencing and discrediting survivors, further exacerbating trauma and stigmatization. Interesting that this degenerate subhuman fuck actually stole an image from her, but I'm not just complaining that he stole an image from her, because that would make me a worthless retard, because anybody can do that. But I will demonstrate, and I have in the past, over a year ago, about a year ago, that this image is misquoted, it's incorrect, and it is not accurately summarizing the underlying material, probably because they didn't even read it. It's just fucking propaganda.
Evil. And the way they do that is by lying, by spreading liberal Zionist propaganda.
Yeah.
It's profitable and it's easy and it's acceptable. You're allowed to say that you think all Palestinians should die.
I'm pro-genocide.
And still get invited to Jubilee as the resident liberal. You're allowed to do it and run your quirky, epic, silly podcasts and make hundreds of thousands of dollars doing that, because the Western media ecosystem encourages it. There will be no justice for the Palestinian people if all we do is watch content about what's happening. Consumption is not politics. There will be no justice for the victims of this genocide unless we all actively fight for it. From the position that most of the viewers of this video have, that's by using the resources and time to continue to speak out, preserve the record of what's actually happened in Gaza, name the perpetrators, and highlight and boost the voices that understand these facts more than anyone in the world, that is, the Palestinian people. Don't stop sharing their stories or contributing to direct aid. I'll leave a document below with some Palestinian voices and outlets that you should follow and campaigns to contribute to. In If I Must Die, Rifat El-Arir tells the story of Yasser Ashur, a young Palestinian survivor.
It's actually so unhinged. Bro, how lucky did we get on that, Hassan? What is he even talking about right now? What?
Is this stupid, right? Yeah.
What am I even involved in right now that he's going over? I didn't say anything about ending, you dumbass. Why would I do that when you're going to be deported?
You're right.
You had a Houthi rebel on.
Every international organ of justice, virtually every single human rights organization, they're all lying about Israel doing a genocide. Okay? They're all lying. You know who's telling the truth?
Destiny.
Your friends, I guess. Or whoever the fuck told you. Some random
Destiny.
drama
Say it.
YouTuber.
Destiny. Or Sex Pestiny, I mean. Or Divorcelli. Oh, he won't say it now. Fuck. Somebody told him on
Read
Discord.
a different book.
Somebody told him on Discord. Don't do it, dude.
Other than fucking, you know, Harry Potter. His military Discord, that's not true because a lot of fucking active duty people that went out there also know what's up. That's not even true.
Anybody that disagrees with you is a centrist slop tuber? Homie, all you do is watch other people shit on streams. You are the only slop person. And I'm sorry, just because this is like a fucking archive channel, I know how it works. Have a fucking second, third party to like upload your dog shit slop onto YouTube and flood the algorithms. Asmon's done it. Everyone's fucking done it. All these streamers do that, okay?
Babes.
All these streamers do it that way. Simple as that.
We do.
All right? That's all it comes down to. So I'm sorry to say, I don't care. All right? I don't care if it's like fucking the archive channel or the fucking main channel or the fucking like, third party fucking like person that's been hired. I see this kind of shit floating around. A 40-minute crash out of this man, okay? Gotta be at least fucking countered. Simple as that. But yeah, these streamers are fucking insane. This is all just like, they want to talk about like anybody. I've never seen this guy actually do anything of substance, all right? Like in reality, now that I really think about it, it's all just like, let me watch fucking CNN, read Twitter, fucking watch some fucking dog shit like video, and then just like barely react to it, if anything.
Damn.
But yeah. Yeah, it's the same shit with anybody. It's like fucking, I've seen this on like the Destiny side. I've seen this fucking with like every single one of these like fucking streamers. It's somehow, all right, they're above the whole drama side of the internet because I guess they're covering like politics. I've never.
True. Remember, I said this just earlier. We're all in one mind now. Okay, I'm getting the microchips, the Neuralink. Bro, I'm covering politics. I'm beyond reproach. Excuse me. You can't attack me. I do politics. I'm too important. True.
I've never actually seen any form of political action. I've never seen any canvassing done by this guy. You know, I'll actually go as far as to say it like this. I will, on my own dime, pay for both of. How about this? At my own dime and my own expense, and like, you know, I'll give up my days of work and making serious money. I will fly both of us down, both me and him, to Israel, and we will drive across the border and like actually, you know, do some real journalism on our own.
I'll chip in 5K. All right, it's not that expensive. I'll chip in 5K to that, Mutahar. Put me down for it. If Hassan and him want to go together.
Well, I will pay for all of it myself. Okay, I will do it on my dime. I will get them there, and that's it. Simple as that. That's my offer that I put up there. Okay. I don't know if he's gonna do it because then he'd have to actually like leave.
True.
You know.
I love that Hassan said he can't do it because he might get killed if he goes there by the IDF.